Hello and welcome to Foreign Policy Focus. This is episode 110 and I am the show's host, Kyle. Foreign Policy Focus is the podcast where I discuss current events related to foreign policy and international affairs and then give analysis on those events. Doesn't always sound like the most interesting topic, but what I'm talking about is, people getting bombed, people having to flee their homes, geopolitics and, grand strategies and bat stabbings and all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, for as much as Americans love Game of Thrones, looking at the U.S. policy in the Middle East is certainly just as crazy, if not more crazy than that. I mean, yeah, the Game of Thrones has dragons, but the Middle East has the United States backing Al-Qaeda and ISIS on multiple fronts. In the Middle East to this very day, we're fighting and helping them in places like Yemen. So while it doesn't always on the face of it seem like the most thrilling thing whenever you really start to talk about it and understand what's really going on, and while we don't have footage of all these bombs going off and all these people dying, and I don't think even if we had it you would want to look at because it's so horrific. I mean, it's one thing when a mass of people die on a TV show like Game of Thrones, but it's another thing when in real life, let's say a funeral parlor gets bombed a couple times and you see bodies flying through the air and realize that somebody is going through and literally picking up body parts, trying to piece people back together to tell the best they can who died where and making sure remains are in the right places so families can best mourn the death of their loved ones. And so, it doesn't sound like the most interesting thing, and it's not like the hottest topic to talk about, but it really is, and there's really so much to it, and it's so important. So for those of you who could take the time to share the show, foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com, on iTunes, Foreign Policy Focus, the Facebook page Kyle's Files, and on the homepage at thelibertarianinstitute.org, where you can also find my daily news roundups. I'm going to start off this show like I started off the last show, talking about probably the most important issue in the world right now, and that is the conflict in Yemen. Not only do we have the starvation of if hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in Yemen, we also have a cholera epidemic that's going to affect 1 million people by the end of it and kill thousands of lives, literally countlessly, because they can only count the bodies that come into the hospital, and most of the bodies just aren't coming into the hospital because the roads, the bridges, and the hospitals have all been destroyed. You also have a blockade in Yemen enforced by the United States of America. Yes, our homeland, our tax dollars are paying for these ships to go over there and keep food from going into the starving children in Yemen. If you could stomach it, go to Nasser Arabi's Facebook Twitter page at Nasser Arabi and check out the pictures he posts. These young children that are literally newborns are starving to death. The shrunken faces, they look like a Benjamin Button thing at times, and that's not meant to be a joke. That's meant to be the best description I could give of what some of these children look like. They look like old people because they have no body fat because they're starving to death. I mean, it seems unthinkable that you have newborns starving to death in the year 2017. I mean, look how most Americans live their lives, even if somebody is homeless and really hurting for food. If you have a child, almost anybody is going to give you free food. You could go to any food pantry or, walk up to any religious building or even any government building, and chances are somebody is going to hand you a couple days worth of food and let you and your child eat. But in Yemen, everybody is starving to death. Nobody has nothing. And there is something that every single one of us could do about it right now. And that is call our representatives and tell them not only to vote for, but to co-sponsor H.Con.Res 81, which is a resolution invoking the War Powers Act and therefore preventing Trump or anybody in the military from continuing to wage a war in Yemen on behalf of the Saudi-led coalition, also UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and I believe Egypt all supported as well, fighting a civil war on behalf of the deposed leader of Yemen, Hadi, as well as Al-Qaeda and ISIS are greatly benefiting from this war. And so, in one fell swoop, everybody could do some big things, which are feed the starving children of Yemen, get them some aid so people stop vomiting and diarrheaing themselves to death from cholera, and combat ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And all you had to do is call your representative and tell them to vote on this very, very important bill. I believe the vote is middle of next week, so I will stress this again on Monday's show, but it is the most important thing any of us could do right now. While Yemen is the most important issue, there are several other very important issues, things going on right now. We have Trump adding travel restrictions to people coming into the United States on foreign flights. These include Americans and include additional searches and interviews. Again, we could see how much our government could really get away with it, as much fear as they created of foreigners for Americans. And you may say this is just Trump-led xenophobia. But let's not forget this warrantless spying on Americans, the 702 program, which I believe I discussed on the last show, was not only enforced under the Obama administration, but was exposed under the Obama administration with the Snowden leaks. And Obama did not say, hey guys, Muslims aren't this bad. We don't have to spy on every single one of you to protect you against them. So, let's all take a deep breath and know that this is okay. And I'll go ahead and end the program and declare Edward Snowden the hero that he is for being the one guy who was willing to stand up and say hell no to this. However, that's not what Obama did. That's not what Clinton did. He starved to death in 500,000 Iraqi children because, we have to be that afraid of the Arabs. And this is, just the pattern that goes on. Some news on the Russiagate front, and that is we have Twitter banning Sputnik News and RT from running ads. Both Sputnik and RT are news agencies funded by the Russian government. However, there are plenty of Twitter accounts associated with the U.S. government, like the anti-ISIS coalition has a Twitter account, and the State Department and the Pentagon have a Twitter account. And they all run ads and do all kinds of other stuff. I don't see what the big deal here is about RT or Sputnik running ads. It's kind of annoying that Twitter's doing this. Personally, I do think it's about time that we demand that the social media networks that we use, be it Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, protect First Amendment, probably first and foremost. I really do find it disgusting when people say nasty and hateful things on Twitter. However, I don't think it's worth it at the expense of censorship. We also have a very interesting twist, and that is the FEC filing a complaint against Hillary Clinton for campaign payments that I guess went to a company associated with the infamous Trump dossier that was pretty much declared to be absolutely false and fictional and fake. And so this would be a really interesting, I guess, connection, because it would be the Clintons using international sources to take down Trump and not Trump to Hillary. Very scary statements out of Vice President Mike Pence, and this is the reason everybody's demanding that Trump gets impeached. And I don't know if that's a good deal, because as bad as Trump is, Pence is, I think, at least on the foreign policy front, much more scary. Taking almost a page out of the jihadist book, Pence says that the United States is going to protect and provide aid to Christians around the world, and in the Middle East especially. And this idea that the United States has somehow this, I guess, responsibility to carry out a global religious war for the sake of the Christians absolutely makes no sense to me. It's 100% unconstitutional and 100% unconservative. If you look at the leaders of conservative thought, they all were, against wars and not against meddling in the Middle East. I think it certainly could be within U.S. policy and conservative thought to support something like, if Mike Pence wants to start a charity to bring over all the Christians to the United States and provide them with housing and food and aid here, or to, provide them with stuff from private charity, that's one thing. But it's certainly not within the United States' job to take money from our taxpayers and send it, and then use it to bomb people possibly attacking Christians in the Middle East. Of course, a lot of these airstrikes will be lies and the Christians won't even be under threat. Remember, this is largely what happened with the Yazidis, where people argued that the Yazidis were under this dire threat from ISIS, and the United States had to do something about it, when really the Yazidis apparently spent a lot of time on that mountaintop anyways, and a lot of the Yazidis that remained up there chose to do so. Also, nobody covered the plight of the Yazidis under Peshmerga control, which apparently was somewhat brutal. We had the first F-35s deployed overseas. They will be deployed in Japan, and there are 12 of them. I'm not sure if they're going to start flying the missions with the B-1B bombers over and around the DMZ. Right now, I believe they're usually F-15s that do that, and the F-15 is usually regarded as a superior plane to the F-35 anyways. It may be a telling thing if the United States ends up using the F-15s over the F-35s in these situations, because while it's nice to play politics and deploy these F-35s everywhere to make Lockheed Martin and their shareholders feel good, if it's an inferior piece of military equipment, then I don't know if the military is willing to take those risks and endanger the lives of U.S. soldiers in order just to, placate the Lockheed Martin and the military industrial complex. Some of the biggest news of the day is that we will have Catalonia's parliament voting for and to go ahead to move with declaring independence from Spain. This is in response to the Spanish government demanding that Catalonia hold new elections, and basically Spain would control who was elected in those elections and elect a non-independent leaning parliament to Catalonia. Spanish president has asked for powers, including the ability to go through and arrest the Catalan government, seize all the government buildings, install a new government of their own choosing, I believe take over like the Catalan police force and everything, and really just straight up invade and then occupy Catalonia. This is right out of the playbook of Franco, who of course oppressed the Catalonians for years and years and years, Catalans. This will be a story worth watching over the weekend. Twitter has done a very good job. This is in the West. This is Spain. So all these people have iPhones. They're all constantly rolling their video. Periscope, Facebook Live, they're live streaming this. So this revolution will be televised and it will be a thing to watch. Right now we have the United States and Germany throwing their hats in with the Spanish government, saying they don't recognize the vote by the Catalan Parliment. However, I don't think that's going to be a side you're going to want to be on when the Spanish police start going and beating these protesters. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody abandons the Spanish cause in the days to come. There are a lot of outstanding issues to be sorted out here. I think some people are under the impression that Catalonia could just leave and that would be that. However, the Spanish government has a lot of outstanding debt and a lot of outstanding assets that they purchased with Catalan money. And so I think that in a lot of sense that the Catalans may even have an incentive to negotiate some of these things, because maybe some of the, military equipment they could claim, oh, well, we want this chunk of it or whatever. The U.S. is looking to expand the drone war to Niger. Unknown if that will happen, but they think that the 4 Green Berets dying in Niger may be a pretty good springboard for the United States to use to pressure the government there to allow the drone strikes to happen. The Niger government has long opposed drone strikes in their country, much like other countries have in the past, Pakistan, Yemen, etc. And a lot of these places, the United States was either able to implement a government pro-drone strikes or bribe the existing leader to do so. North Korea news. We have a bill introduced by Senator Chris Murphy and will hopefully be supported by others. This bill will prevent Donald Trump from launching an aggressive war against North Korea without congressional authorization. As this bill starts to take form, I'll update you more on it and see where it goes, if it goes anywhere. Read an interesting article by Peter Van Buren on why we haven't had any nuclear conflict between the United States and North Korea, and this goes back to the Soviet era idea of mutually assured destruction, and that right now the North Koreans have enough capabilities to threaten the United States enough for the United States cannot attack North Korea. One thing that might change the balance of everything a little bit though is Donald Trump's visit to the DMZ. Not sure what Trump's logic is here. It seems to be a very, Trump-like, I'm the alpha dog kind of policy, in that even when I go and pee on Kim Jong-un's lawn, he can't do anything about it because I'm the alpha dog in the neighborhood. And I think that's his goal by going and walking around the DMZ. At times, I swear, it does seem like Donald Trump is trying to provoke Kim Jong-un. I really hope that's not the case. Trump made a somewhat interesting statement saying that China has been helping with North Korea, but Russia has been hurting the U.S. effort. I believe his criticism was more of Russia's unwillingness to sanction and prevent more trade from going to North Korea. However, the North Korean people need food and stuff, and good for the Russians that they're providing something to people. Remember, from my perspective, I think that the solution in North Korea would be to open trade with the country completely. I think once the North Korean people understood how Americans live their lives, they would tell Kim Jong-un to beat it pretty freaking quickly. There's really no reason to live in a communist state in 2017. It's not very great. Look at the way those poor people live, where when a famine rolls through, hundreds of thousands of them will end up dead. While in the United States, the problem is going the other way. People eat too much. The U.S. House has passed a new sanctions bill, adding the strictest sanctions ever against any country on North Korea. Basically, what would happen is if this bill gets signed into law is that anybody who does any business with North Korea will not be able to do business with the United States. Because of the large amount of global transactions that go on in U.S. dollars, with the United States dollar being the world's reserve currency, this would cause an awful lot of problems for North Korea, but could also cause some problems for the United States, because anybody who may be sympathetic to North Korea and want to do business with North Korea would, then have to use some currency outside of the U.S. dollar to do those transactions. In Iraq, we continue to have clashes and conflicts between the Peshmerga and the Iraqi army. While the Iraqi army, I don't think, is outright admitting they're having these clashes, in the United States military is doing their best to kind of sweep them under the rug. They do seem to be going on in some areas of northern Iraq around the Syrian-Turkish-Iraq border. There's an awful lot going on here, and there's an awful lot left to be played out. I know that Kurds have offered freezing their referendum in exchange for the Iraqi army not taking any more territory from the Kurds, and then Turkey and Iraq rejected that offer. We had today that the United States coalition fighting ISIS announced a ceasefire between Iraq and the Peshmerga, and then later walked that statement back, saying there actually wasn't a ceasefire. So, like I said, a lot to be played out here. I think there are some interesting things with the Iraq government seizing a lot of the oil fields around Kirkuk from the Peshmerga. Then they now control, I believe, about half of what was once the amount of oil that the Kurds were able to turn out every day. If the Iraqi government is able to get all those oil fields up and running, they would then have the ability to possibly give enough oil to Turkey that Turkey was willing to close off their oil pipeline with the Kurds, and essentially really economically isolating the Kurds from the rest of the world. I read an interesting story about a card that the Kurds have to play, though, and that is that all this oil technology that they use to actually, pump the oil out of the ground with is all, computerized and set up by Kurdish engineers. And so they're all password protected and stuff, and the Iraqi government doesn't know that information. So to really, speed the process along and make it cheaper, if they were able to have some kind of negotiations with the Kurdish government, and the Kurdish government gave that information over, it would really help the Iraqi government. So we'll see if that ends up being a part of the game being played here in northern Iraq. In Syria, we have Rex Tillerson saying that Assad is on his way out. This is completely delusional. It looks like Assad is at least going to control most of western Syria, if not the whole country once again one day. And to say Assad is on his way out just isn't a practical thing to say. Also, when we're looking at the situation we now have in Syria with a large Al-Qaeda stand existing in the Idlib province, we still have some ISIS in the eastern portion of Syria, and then almost a borderline drawn between East and West Syria along the Euphrates River, with the YPG and SDF controlling the east side, and then the Syrian government controlling the west side. And so not only are Tillerson's comments just wrong and stupid, they're also diplomatically bad, because at this point in time we could wind down the Syrian civil war. After 6+ very long years, the Syrian people can finally get back to a sense of normalcy in their lives and live in a way not under war state. People could stop dying. I'm sure so many hundreds of thousands of people have died in the Syrian civil war. Just to return to some kind of normal life would be great for all these people, and the United States needs to let that happen. Also, Sarah saw a very interesting story out of The Intercept, where we had Saudi prince providing the FSA with arms back in March of 2013 to attack the Damascus airport and the Assad palace. Now, I just, bring up this story mostly to mention, imagine if this had been Iran. If Iran had armed up, let's say, Hezbollah to attack the capital of Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, well, this would be an outrage. This would be Iran destabilizing the Middle East and all this other nonsense that they always come up with. So let's just remember that all the Middle East politics is very complicated. Nobody certainly has their hands clean, and that includes very strong U.S. allies in the UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, Qatar as well. And our enemies sometimes maybe have a little bit less dirt on their hands, although the hands are still very dirty. Alright, that's where I'm going to wrap up today's show, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the shows this week. I'll be back next week. foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com, the libertarianinstitute.org, Facebook page, Kyle's Files, iTunes, give me a rating and review there, Foreign Policy Focus, Twitter, KYAAALE, personal website is kylesfilesblog.com. Don't forget to call your representative, H.Con.Resolution 81.